Okay, so we know what to do when they play d4. We play out the knight. They play c4, c4. We play e6. This move does a couple things. This simple move, just moving the pawn forward, it makes it so we're now guarding these two squares in the center of the board. We can play d5 in the future if we want to, and we are letting the bishop get out so we can castle. The Nimzo-Indian is very simple, fundamental chess. It's just getting castled quickly, having a good basic setup, and being flexible. Nothing super fancy at the beginning. That's not what we want to do. So they will play the knight out, as we saw in the intro lecture, and we will play the bishop. Now, one of the most common things that people will do as white here is they'll immediately say, I don't like your bishop pinning my knight, and I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to trade it off. If we move our bishop back here, then we see that they can simply block us, and they can trap our bishop. So in this case, obviously, we didn't move the bishop out here just to move it back again. It makes no sense. So we're going to trade this bishop off. Now, a lot of people think this is counterintuitive because if you start learning some of the strategic aspects of chess, you learn that it can usually be an advantage to have the bishop pair, meaning you want to keep both of your bishops on the board because each bishop can control one of the colors of squares. And so once you lose the bishop pair, it can sometimes be a disadvantage. However, there are exceptions to every general rule in chess. And so in this case, we are going to trade off this bishop in order to do a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do by taking the knight here is we're going to double white's pawns. Now, the doubling of pawns is not always a weakness. That's a big misconception with a lot of chess players before you've had much instruction in the game. You think, okay, this is ugly, this is a weakness. That's not always true. In this case, it's not really a big weakness. It's basically a trade-off. We have traded off the bishop pair in order for white to have this potential weakness. Now, depending on how white plays, it's either going to be a weakness or not. Now, white has to at least defend this weird pawn formation right here. So it's going to tie down his pieces somewhat. However, he is going to get the potential advantage of the bishop pair. So for white, they want to make the full use of their bishops. They want to make sure they activate these bishops since we don't have a dark squared bishop. That's what white's going to try to do. We are going to focus on these pawns here. And this is one of the great things about the Nimzo-Indian defense is that we have a very clear objective. And in chess, when you have a very clear objective, in this case focusing on a clear weakness or turning this into a clear weakness, it makes it so that we can make fast moves. If we're playing blitz, for example, this is a really good opening for blitz because we know exactly what we want to accomplish and the opponent has to think a lot. They're the ones who are on the back foot. Even though technically this position is totally equal right now, we haven't really gained anything, we are making it so white's going to have to defend these pawns and we are going to be able to attack these pawns. So psychologically, this is a easier position to play for black. That's a big factor in chess. Psychology is really important, especially when you're playing blitz and you're having to take quite a lot of time to make your moves. So this is an easy opening to play and it allows for clarity and quick movements, okay? So we trade off the piece. Now what do? We can go ahead and just castle, which is a nice solid thing to do. But since we've created this little weakness here, we want to immediately go to guns on it, as it were, to use a Top Gun phrase. We want to immediately start to pressure it so white has to react to us. And since we have no danger, there's no threat here at all, we can delay castling, it's fine. Normally we want to castle early and often, as the old saying goes, but in this case, we're going to immediately put pressure on this pawn. So what we're going to do is we're going to play b6. And by playing b6, we're going to get our bishop out here to a5, and we're going to aim it at this pawn. White is going to have to defend it if it doesn't want to lose a pawn. And if white doesn't defend well and ends up losing this pawn, we're going to get a pretty good advantage in this game, go into a strong endgame, or just have a material lead, which is always good to have. One pawn in chess is actually often enough to win the game, and it also helps once you get up a pawn psychologically. Maybe you can try to win a little bit more material and get a decisive advantage. So each pawn is really important in chess, actually. You don't want to be just dropping pawns willy-nilly, okay? So we're going to focus on this pawn. And white is going to have to defend it. Now, there's lots of different things that white can do, but the first thing they should do if they've decided to play this opening is they need to worry about getting castled and getting safe because their king is like a little bit exposed potentially right here. We're going to be bringing our pieces out. One thing that a lower level player might do here is something like put their bishop here and put a pin on this knight. we're not really worried about this in the situation at all. There's no way to attack this knight and put pressure on him. We're going to just continue with our plan if they go ahead and do that, and we're going to take our bishop out. We're just going to focus on this pawn. This is actually a wasted move for them. If they go ahead and trade this knight, well, that's fine. They just gave us the bishop pair back. So they lost the advantage of the bishop pair, and now we have our pieces on nice squares, and they have an advantage. That would not be a very good thing for for white to do. And so that's not a very good move. A lot of people might make that move thinking, I'm going to make this pin here on the queen. It's not an issue for us at all. Just don't worry about that at all. However, if you want to, and this is something you can do a few moves later, depending on how the game goes out, we can go ahead and, okay, it's white's move, let's say. We can go ahead and put the question to the bishop, as it were, and make it back up. And usually, we don't really want to set up our pawns this way. It makes it so we don't want to castle this way. It's kind of a weakness. And so white might think this is good. But in this case, we can go ahead and castle long and focus, just continually focus on our plan of attacking this pawn. It's actually fine. In this particular position, this is nothing to worry about. However, we're not going to look at that quite yet. We're just going to ignore that piece for now. And we're just going to assume, for example, that the knight comes out, knight to f3. We're going to continue our plan of attacking this pawn. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our knight out, and then we're going to move our knight over to a5, and we're going to put two pieces on this pawn. And he's either going to have to move the pawn down and really create a weakness here, or he's going to have to hold his pieces down to defend it, giving us a nice little advantage in the game. So now we're focusing on this, and he's seeing that. And so a typical thing that white will do here is play this pawn out. Maybe they might play it to e4 right here. They can't do that right now because basically we can force them to trade. If they do that, we can force them to trade this piece. And now our position is looking really good, and their position is looking kind of weak. I mean, they don't want to push these pawns forward. This achieves nothing. I can just move my queen to somewhere better. I mean, there's nothing that they're really gaining from doing this. You notice that white is undeveloped. Their king is in the middle. And while our king is in the middle, look, we can castle either way as we choose. Our pieces are more developed. This is not a good position for white. So don't worry about that move. Okay. So if they go there, we do have to worry about this pawn coming down here now, though, because this knight is pinned, and because of that, we don't want this pawn to come down. So there's a couple things you could do if they decide to play this move. We can put this pawn up here and defend, but the best thing to do in this case is simply put this pawn out and then force him to trade or force him back. In this case, it's fine. Once we move this piece out, we're going to castle long, and then this pawn structure will actually be good for us to attack in the center. And we will simply go like this and attack this pawn. We have two attackers on it, and this is going to be putting pressure on him. He's going to be tied down. So we're going to leave it there for this lecture so we don't run too long, and we will continue from this position in the next lesson.